So everybody signed in? No, we're missing one person still. Whoever did sign in. And I don't think we have any new faces. Anything anybody want to talk about today? Terrence and I were talking about Project Tommel a little bit earlier, and had a kind of random idea of, what if we made the top level keys domains? Hey, there's Terrence. So, Terrence, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
We didn't have anything on the agenda, so I was going to talk about bring up the Project Tommel domains idea and see what people thought.
Sure. Sounds good.
We're talking a little bit about, how could we add more flexibility there? And one idea I had was, could we use could we make Project Tommel like Docker labels, where you can have any fields you want on it. Nothing's reserved except if they match domains, and then configuration, could go into each of those things. Or if there's an idea there, we could expand out on, of like reserved format as opposed to reserved, individually reserved keys, and let the top level vary. I don't know if it's a developed enough idea to talk about extensively today.
Yeah, Terrence had showed me that. I think it makes a lot of sense. The aesthetics could be better, but once it was in use, I wonder if it would feel that way. Like I don't like when I use Maven artifacts, I don't really think about the aesthetics of the group ID. It's just what it is. So I wonder if it's just me being picky.
I do think the aesthetics are better too if it's generated. Like you care less about it being ugly if you don't have to write it.
Just make sure I'm understanding what that mean. Like everything we have now goes under an IO Buildpacks map or something like that.
Either quoted buildpacks.io or io.buildpacks, and it's like literally an IO table and a buildpacks table underneath.
Yeah, we could also do it reverse if you wanted to actually, I don't know, that could be really weird. Like you have a com table with Heroku under it and then something else under it. I don't know.
I think we'd either have to do that, right? Reverse domain, and then exactly like have a com table, and then but you don't have to specify the com table. It'll automatically get created. So you could still do quote com.heroku or whatever, or bracket on bracket, right? Or if we did domains, we could still just do full domains, but you'd have to quote the key in the table. So it'd be like bracket quote buildpacks.io quote bracket, and that seems pretty gross.
Wait, so you're saying Heroku.com wouldn't work?
It wouldn't work. That's right. It wouldn't work without quotes around it. It would have to be quote Heroku.com quote bracket.
Why is that?
Because then you do have a Heroku top level table with a com subtable in it.
Oh yeah, no one would see that unless they dump it to JSON, though, right?
They'd have to know to quote it, right? It's different usage.
Well, I think Joe's saying, like, what if we didn't quote it? What if we just, had that structure occur? I think you'd run into some pretty weird things, like the tables would overlap by when arbitrary subdomains or the root of the domains happen to overlap.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'm fine with reverse. Again, I don't know if that's my lineage, with Maven and everything.
What's the value of reverse? Can someone remind me why Maven
top level goes at the top? It's just like that's the order it should be. It's like the internet's doing it wrong.
Yeah, so why would we follow it?
Well, I think basically if you have a subdomain, like you imagine com.heroku.something, right? It means that if we didn't quote it, right, like you would have com as a group, I guess, which whatever. Then you could have multiple different other companies or things under com that would make sense. But then Heroku would be in its own table. But then you had then another sub thing like whatever, like that would still be under the Heroku table there. Whereas if you inversed it, like it wouldn't work that way for at least top
like
testing.
I could totally legit see like com.salesforce.business unit, com.salesforce.business unit to, you know, that would be a very real possibility.
Is there a reason to be, I guess, subjective to domains versus just namespaces, arbitrary namespaces like Heroku or Salesforce, and then being able to have nested namespaces?
Domains have approvable. There's a registrar that maintains who owns exactly what domain name. So,
but we wouldn't care for that, right? Like even in Maven, that's not really something that's validated or verified.
I wish Ben was here. There is some amount of validation. Like, I don't know if they actually like check who owns that domain, but like, for example, if you have a GitHub account, you can register com.githubs.your name, your username, and they actually verify that that's your user on GitHub.
It's not about the security really though. It's not about having automated validation of it. It's about interoperable systems. So if I say I define com.docker. Whatever key to be this, but I'm not actually Docker, right? Nobody's going to agree to interoperate with that key because they're going to say that they broke the rule. They're not supposed to declare keys under com.docker, right? But if as a project we say io.buildpacks. Whatever means this, right? And that's published on buildpacks.io, then everybody knows, yes, that is something I can rely on for interoperability. And it's nice because generally contracts are published on the domains that match their key names.
I think it also makes it, so the one thing I dislike is just how verbose it is. I think it's just extra verbose. But the benefit is that it also means that because it's verbose, like conflict, like namespace conflict, will be significantly less common or almost non-existent, right? Like no one's going to reserve a key that is com.heroku like under their global namespace unless they, but like you can imagine someone potentially taking Heroku because they might like do a thing that maybe is
Terrence,
like
I think your microphone is are you come through your computer or something? Low? It's really low, yeah.
Oh. Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Could you hear me, Javier? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I'm not literally like, I'm not against the idea. I'm just trying to get some clarity as to the decision other than, copying something that somebody else does.
I'm trying to understand.
Go ahead, Emily.
I guess I'm trying to understand like what this gets us that's different from having like a platforms table that people can reserve keys under, like platform.heroku, because it just seems like that semantically is less, aesthetically, not semantically. It's just aesthetically more pleasing and it makes sense semantically.
I'm not sure it's aesthetically more pleasing, but it definitely demotes those like vendor specific keys to sort of a second class thing. And I think what Terrence is really after is that first class feel to the com.heroku or whatever it is.
Because it's at the same, like I feel like it's all now demoted under some structure, right? Is it just that the Heroku stuff should be the same depth as the tables that are approved by the project? Is that like what the difference between first class and second class is?
It's the word, I think it's a semantic thing, right? It's the word platforms implies that, oh, this is a sub key for Heroku, whereas com.heroku implies, like first class in the file, there is Heroku, is my understanding. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Terrence, does that seem right?
Yeah, and I think it also aligns to what Joe said, because if you had platform, you probably would do platform.heroku for something, and then you define a thing. So now you're like, I guess, potentially two keys in, whereas the rest of the Buildpacks project is at the top level. One of the things I was talking to Stephen about too is could even imagine where one of the top level keys in a namespace thing would be like a schema version. And then you can imagine like each one of these namespaces could then define and publish their own schema for that table. And you would do the same thing for like io.buildpacks as well for our version of Project Hummel.
I think another interesting thing about this is if you did want to have a top level table called just Heroku without com.heroku, right? Or just, VMware without com.vmware, right? You could do that in the same way that you can do that with Docker labels, right? You have, there's no way to prove that, the ownership is what it is, right? But it does leave us with that, entirely open namespace at the top level of everything that's not a domain is valid to define, right? And so, you could define it. You get less strong guarantees and less interoperability, but you could throw whatever you want at the top level, right? And it would be okay. Just like people regularly throw labels on Docker images that don't follow the reverse domain name notation, when they want to. It's only bad if you do that with com.docker, right?
The other thing I like about this, that especially as compared to like the platform table, is that it really lets it sit outside of the Buildpacks concept. Like I could totally imagine a Project Toml with some Terraform key that just has a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with Buildpacks. And maybe you don't even have Buildpack stuff in there, but it seems like the original idea was that it could do that. I don't know. Maybe that ship sailed. Maybe that's not realistic, but it definitely aligns with that.
Advantage to the reverse domain notation is that the underlying keys under a domain could at your discretion be subdomains or just properties, right? And so as Terrence was saying with the versioning, right, you could define a subversion of any, kind of at any table along the line. So if you had two large business units within a large company, they could, do com.example.business unit 1 and have a schema there that's separate from com.example.business unit 2, right? So it feels extensible in a very generic way, like Joe, what you're kind of saying. It's like feels like we're defining something that's outside the project in a good way.
Do you have other thoughts, Emily? I know you were one of the big proponents of the platform table from the original discussion.
I'm chewing it over. Just from like a lazy practical person perspective, as someone who writes Project Tomls quickly with some regularity to like spike things out, it's like a little bit cumbersome and ugly, right? To put IO Buildpacks in front of everything. But I'm sure once I started doing it, I would get used to it. In my mind, I feel like the big decision is like, are we trying to make the TOML file to end all TOML files where everyone puts everything in there? Or are we, like at one point, we're talking about going the absolute opposite direction and making more like Docker files. So it was very obvious that it was like a marker when someone landed in a repo, like, yes, this is a Buildpack build.
The Buildpack file comment?
Yeah.
I definitely agree that we should move in one of those two directions, right? Either if we're going to have platform specific stuff, make this a very generic thing, right? I like the, taking what Docker did with labels, right? In that situation, and like, learning from how other people have done similarly generic things in the past. But then if we go the other direction, like I'd really like to not call it Project Toml, right? Like Buildpack file, put Buildpack specific stuff in it, keep the schema very fixed, one fixed version at the top, right? Would be my preference. But I don't have a strong preference between which way we go, actually.
Like if we want to go the generic way, I think this makes sense. I do think we leave something behind. It's a trade-off, right? Like people don't even know it's cool if people can know that something is a Buildpack build, sort of from a marketing perspective, right?
It works. I don't think it's the right thing to do. Like, I feel like those like named files like Docker file they end up littering the repository. It's like, here's your file for that technology and here's your file for this technology. Like I kind of feel like if we need that to market ourselves, we should probably be doing a better job at marketing. But I don't know. I definitely lean towards the generic side, but I 100% agree with you, Stephen. I think like we need to sort of pick one.
Can you do? I wonder if like they're even like. I think you can even imagine a world where potentially you can support both. Where if there is a Buildpack file, like we get rid of Project Toml, but Project Toml becomes the generic thing, and so you could have a Buildpack file that does that, and then if you don't have a Buildpack file in your Project Toml and you want it all in one file, you could have like the IO Buildpacks kind of define that schema, or even point to like the Buildpack file or something, right? Where it's like in each of one of these things, it points to that thing if that's what you want.
Yeah, I was gonna say it could import essentially,
Yeah, like where
right,
it just
from the
imports
Project
that.
Toml. Yeah.
I like that. Where
that-
like if we had a Buildpack file would be like everything that would be in IO Buildpacks just taken out to the top level. I think in a lot of cases that might be all someone would need, but a Project Toml file could allow you to specify that in the same file as other things if you wanted.
I feel like you'd want that.
important.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
I
Joe.
feel like you'd want that to support other things too, like Docker file or whatever. Like, to me, that's just like a strong indication that we do want the generic path, because if we think we're going to have that pattern with some kind of Buildpack file, then we should design it in a way that it doesn't only work with the Buildpack file and also works with whatever else, you know.
I guess my question would be like, if we did this with a Buildpack file, what I'm imagining is that I don't actually need Project Toml most of the time, right? Like if I'm worried about littering files, I could roll everything under one file, but if the only thing here I need is a Buildpack file, I could just have the Buildpack file.
I guess that's kind of what I was suggesting, that I think they're not necessarily like one or the other. Like I think you could try to do both things, but not what Project Toml looks like today, right? Like I think you'd have a version thing, and then you could have a Project Toml that is larger in scope that could allow you to either import something like a Buildpack file where, like you're saying, the schema is mostly the same, or if you want to just have one file, you could just have a thing that allows us to do the domain thing.
And in order for the Project Toml to like be successful too, right? Like it needs to be adopted by other projects and not just cloud native build packs, because otherwise we'd be just doing ourselves a disservice and not reaping the rewards. So I don't know exactly what that means, but I feel like that maybe falls out of the scope of this particular project and into something completely different. Like as it is right now, right? Like there are so many different projects that all have very different configuration files, whether it be git ignore, editor config, which that in itself is trying to centralize editing configuration. But then you have a whole bunch of other ones as well. And I don't know, it seems like a very specific task to try to unify as many as possible configuration files into one file.
I agree with that. I'm sure that I find it easier to navigate when it's all in one file versus multiples, right? But I feel like we could just have it both ways, where Pack and the lifecycle understand a Project Toml with domain level keys. Or if there is no Project Toml, they understand, like there's a default path to a Buildpack file that they understand.
No, that was just my trying to make both paths work idea, but
I like the both option. We can have it all.
you want your cake and you're gonna eat it too.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fine. I just, we should definitely try to be aware that I think it is the harder of the three options, and that like
Yes.
we got to think about like I don't want it to be a project file that supports just Buildpack file. It's got to work with other things.
I don't know if
But
this
I'm
helps.
fine with it.
Sorry. I don't know if this helps or makes it worse, but one of the things, at least I believe I've brought up a few times, is the idea that like right now the project TOML file is an extension of the spec, but to really like, I don't know, reap what it's trying to provide, I feel like it needs to be a little bit more ingrained with the core spec, in a way where like the use case that I'm thinking about is you run this configuration in, via pack, and stuff builds in a very specific manner that you've configured, and it's checked into your code base and all that. And now you're trying to deploy it to whatever platform that may be, right? And it could be Heroku, it could be the Google platform or any other platform. And if they don't take into consideration the project TOML file and the things that they're configured there, then you have to like manually go and tweak. So it's not essentially portable in the same way that we'd probably want it to be. So if that's like the primary goal of the project TOML file, then I feel like it needs to be incorporated more into the core spec. Long term, obviously.
I think we put it in extension spec. I remember Ben saying because stuff in there like we don't want to require platforms to support it to be basically CMB. I don't know if compliance is the right word, but like to say you basically you are a fully supported like platform that follows CMB. So I remember we wanted to make Project TOML like optional at the time when we put it there. I don't know if our stance on that has changed.
I think if we move to the lifecycle reading it, right, then it sort of moves into the platform spec.
I don't think it has to. I think it may be, if it moves into the life cycle, it needs to be more than an extension, but it could also be its own. I think it could be its own project, right? Like we support many specification life cycle, including like the container registry spec, right? So I think like if it goes into life cycle, extension is probably the wrong place for it, but I think there's more than one option.
I guess if we're imagining this top level domain file and it could be its own project, I feel like what that project is different, right? We wouldn't be specifying the types of keys we specify now. You basically just provide a mapping of domains to config files that could be inlined. I wonder if I worry that at the end of the day, the only people who will actually support it are Buildpacks, right? Like, do we need to?
But if everybody uses Buildpacks,
might need to do more socializing to see if there's even desire to participate in one giant config.
There's definitely, yeah, I think there's desire from the folks at Google. At least, I mean, when you're talking to their dev advocacy folks, it's a little bit different from talking to the engineering side, but they're the ones that pushed their use of app.json, which I was disappointed to find out they were keeping alive. But they've been using Project TOML with Pack to do some interesting things. So they may have an appetite. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing. Until people start using it, people aren't going to use it. But yeah, I'm happy to give up that dream and just make it a Buildpack specific thing. But as long as
Are
it's
you
like
happy or
intentional.
okay with doing it?
I may be happy. I don't know. I don't know why I don't know why I cared about this thing in the first place.
I think you were tired of like the 5 different file formats that came out. Of
Yeah,
Heroku.
I didn't want to fail a 5th time was basically it. I think we can make the decision about extension and some things like that later. The sort of best of both worlds approach sounds like there's a lot of appetite for that, and certainly gives us the option to kick Project Tom to the curb at some point if we just don't use it, or if like Heroku is using it, Heroku can make it a Heroku thing if just nobody else is using it.
I mean, I'd definitely be interested in the Google conversation.
Yeah, they need,
if they actually have an appetite for it. I think that definitely changes the game.
Yeah, I think
bit.
the thing is they're stuck on a few things they need. Like they just pinged me yesterday about the group editions RFC, which they didn't know the group editions RFC existed, but they wanted pre and post, or they didn't call it pre and post, but they wanted that in the Project Toml because they need, like, having it on the CLI didn't work. So I think like it's one of those things where until it's like really fully featured, they'll never like sink their teeth into it. And I suspect inline Buildpacks is a big part of that too, which I've just been waiting for, like, to get through prepare before implementing that thing that's already been RFC'd.
Okay. I can take a stab at. I'll probably close my other RC, and then take a stab at writing something up. I probably need to also talk to product people on our end to see how open they are to Steven's idea, because that was not in the original thing I talked to them about. But I guess in Steve's idea, if this thing went through, like, we can still just cargo cult like whatever keys we want in the namespace. So I guess that's also true.
If you want, we can talk to James, see what they think.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious if they would be open to it.
Cool. If we're done with that, I did add something else to the agenda, maybe somewhat related.
Go for it.
So this came up via one of the issues in PAC, I believe, where somebody was looking to be able to provide environment variables at runtime. And to me, I feel like there's an added complexity with process types, but I think it would be reasonable to expect that you could provide runtime environment variables per process type. And so this seems very reasonable, to add to Project Toml in some way. I think we have like a build section for environment variables. And so I was thinking about putting a runtime or an RFC, for runtime environment variables in Project Toml in the same vein, broken down by process type.
I think that sounds. Go ahead, Emily.
I was going to say, I definitely think, I feel like we've wanted that for some time. On the Paketo side, we wrote a build pack that does this. But this in like labels are things that we've written build packs to support that I think it makes sense to natively support in the project. I will say, I think for most use cases, you don't want it to be as naive as the build one where everything is an override. Like, I think you need the append, prepend, delimiter options as well.
I'm not sure I'm well versed on all that, so I might have to dig into how that impacts my vision.
The realistic use cases where I've seen people using our build pack to do this, they're almost always appending or prepending something rather than overriding something.
to a pre-existing environment variable, right? Like, so the contents of the environment variable, like path or something like that. Is that more or less what you're thinking?
Yeah, it'd be like, Java Buildpack said Java tool options, and you want to add another flag in there.
Interesting.
So
I was
So
talking
the tricky part about this is that I don't think we have any concept of the process types in Project Toml yet. So like, while I totally agree this makes sense to have, I think there's like a tougher question about like, how do process types fit in? And we've run into this with other things too, where it's like, oh, what, like, should Project Toml be able to support multiple images? Like sort of like different build configurations. Like I have build packs for this image and then different set of build packs for this image because it's a mono repo. Like should you just simply be able to define process types in Project Toml? Like I feel like that's what this sort of begs that question.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
I think you should
Custom process types in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So like maybe the precursor is process types, and then we figure out how to put runtime environment variables in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also don't want to scope creep on it, but yeah.
You can also, you're going to need just generic ones for every process and process specific ones. It's the other way to approach it, just start with the generic ones, because that's
the all table, right? And
the interface into the lifecycle is going to need some thought, though. Like, you can put it in Project Toml, but then what are you going to do?
I don't know. I'll leave it up to you to figure it
out. One of the things I was talking to David about from this, because there was this issue, and then I think there was another one from Slack about wanting to do, I don't remember exactly, but something else. And I almost wonder, like, essentially, I think what people want, because of both it's useful, but also I think a lot of people also just have potentially a background of writing stuff in Dockerfile, we're able to kind of do all these things that a build pack can, that I almost wonder, is inline build pack the right answer for like, we have an API for build packs, may not be exactly what we want the user experience to be, but it seems like if I just wrote an inline build pack to do all these things, I can do all the things people are asking, right? It's like define process types, define environment variables, define all these things. Not saying we shouldn't have a separate mechanism for it, but I do think that there's once we open this can of worms too, like, I think there's probably more and more functionality we probably would want to add.
No, yeah, I totally agree. But like, I feel like we had this discussion when we did the inline build pack thing, and it was like the magic stuff, or like the little things that make it easier to do the common stuff, is a real slippery slope. Like right now, inline build packs have no magic. It's like, here's your bin script or your build script or whatever. And that's really cumbersome to just add, just append an envar or whatever. But as soon as you just have like a special key that does that for you, there's all the other stuff of like, well, what if another build pack, like all the things we ran into when we were trying to add the magic to the inline build pack RFC.
Yeah.
However, I think like, as soon as you introduce the very basic, like, set an envar, people are going to want more powerful capabilities. Like, maybe I want to set this dynamically based on some other file in my repository that I read in. And then that's when it's like, well, it's nice that this is an inline build pack, because I can do that.
And also the pre-post stuff, right? Because sometimes you need these envars to be set before a build pack that's in a group that you don't control, for instance.
Well, yeah.
I feel like you can always fall back to the inline build pack, but I do think it's a lot easier for someone just to say label key equals value, rather than have to write an inline build pack script that knows to write a launch toml that has the key and value. And also, like, you don't have to think about build pack order as much if it's just the app brings the config, right?
Yeah, although like the Lisp programmer in me is like, well, if you can do it, this the build pack, like, just make everything build pack. It's like, it's build pack all the way down.
I think the problem though is we got to think about the different personas, right? And like an app developer or anybody that's configuring something like doesn't want to learn how to write a build pack, right? Whether it's inline or not, like that's a whole different contract versus me passing an environment variable it via CLI or putting it in a project configuration file.
I agree. Although Dockerfile surprised me. Granted, it's a lot easier to use, but like
Yeah.
5-6 years ago, I never would have imagined that people were like, oh yeah, I'll just pick an operating system and set all these things that I've never cared about or knew about before. But
I think like right now, right, like we will have that capability with inline build packs. I mean, even right now we have relative based build packs. So you could have a build pack built in and just point to it relatively via Project Tummel. So technically we have a quote unquote workaround, but it's definitely not ideal, right, for that app developer to be like, okay, create these files and then like copy and paste this snippet that I'm going to give you real quick. So you could put environment variables in here.
Yeah,
I completely agree. It might be elegant that everything could be a build pack, but as a user, I just want to tell you what environment variable I want.
yeah, no, I totally agree.
I do think if we going down the case of just defining it in Project Tummel and not the inline build pack thing, I do think we should scope it to be not trying to do everything for everyone, because I think you should fall back to inline build pack if you want to, because I feel like the more complex you make it, the harder it is to configure. Like if I am
it's just another thing they have to learn. Yeah,
if I'm an app developer and I want to be able to just set an environment variable or do these things, like I think we should aim for probably a little bit on the simpler side of like I just want to do those things, and then if it's like, well, I actually need to like append this thing based on this other thing, like they probably should be dropping down to an inline build pack or something, is what I'm thinking.
So what I think I'm hearing is limit it to where it's a sibling to the build environment variables for runtime. Apply them to all using the override mechanism. Is that more or less the thought?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I'm not married to specifics of like where that line sits, but I think that we're going to implement inline build packs and it should be used for, maybe we can make it easier to like do things in inline build packs, but definitely like if you have much more complex cases, I think it'll be very ugly to try to encapsulate that in Tummel.
Yeah, I think
I worry about the Java append one now. Like those are the ones that worry me a bit, like appending more search paths and stuff like that. Like the .NET one kind of that came out of that discussion. Like it's not the same thing, but if someone could have controlled that from like a Project Tummel, like appending a new search path, that would have been
that was
something
the example I was
useful.
thinking of.
Yeah, I think where I would maybe draw the line is the prerequisite to process types. Like maybe keep that for a future work. But for now, try to incorporate the different types of environment variable, overriding, appending, and so on.
At that point, you're learning part of the Buildpack API, right?
Depends on how it's presented, but yes, but like there's no notion of putting it in a very specific file at a specific location type of thing. And there's no need for two files, right? It's just one key with maybe one flag.
Tummel just does like equal sign, right? You can't do like plus equals or minus equals, right? It's not a thing.
Yeah, just equal signs.
No special syntax necessary. Yeah.
Is there a
It include
serialization
interpolation.
format that yeah.
Make it real fun. Yeah. I mean, I think that definitely helps. I'll see if I could put an RFC together or delegate to somebody. But
nice.
Yeah. We'll see.
If you
I really
figure out
want
how
this
to
to
do that, let me
exist.
know.
it definitely ties into other conversations we punted. Like, does the lifecycle read project toml? Like, to actually do this, we need to answer some of those questions and not just keep punting them, right?
Where do you stand on that, Emily?
I don't care anymore. One way or the other, let's just do it. Preference for reading it, but I don't care that much.
Yeah, I guess the other way would be like platform env or something like that, and then lifecycle reads from there using the same like .append, .override file format that we use today for Buildpacks or something, and just last in.
Yeah, that was my other thought. Like, take platform
Yeah.
and actually move it to platform buildpack. Buildpacks would never notice there's a change, but then make a platform lifecycle, like platform to lifecycle communication, and we can make a place for that to be, and then we could start putting things in there. Right now we just have random files littered around in it. It's not great. And the platform's usually a volume, so it works in K's, all that fun stuff.
I think that this is definitely interesting because the problem, at least from my perspective that I care about, is just that it works, right? Like from a end user's perspective. And so I care that the project toml has this capability, that pack, somehow maybe has this capability, but then how the internals work between the platform and the lifecycle implementation, I feel like that's a little bit out of my scope, just of knowledge and comprehension. So maybe I'll need a little bit of assistance there.
I mean, even working on the Tecton stuff, right? Like, when you think about if I was going to implement support for this in Tecton, what would it look like?
That's a good use case or thought process.
Does Kpack support project toml?
Not yet that I'm aware of.
Yeah, the problem with it being in like the platform, I mean, it's not a problem in the platform directory, but it's kind of like the whole prepare stage, right? Like if the prepare stage is like optional in reading project toml, then it's going to need to emit an order toml and these invars and these invar files with the postfix stuff, and it needs to, I don't know, like right now we're kind of assuming that maybe those files get emitted in the layers directory, but I guess they could be emitted in a platform directory. But I don't know, it sort of blurs the line between like, yeah, I don't know where those files belong really. Like you said, they're just kind of everywhere right now, and like layers seems like the logical place because that's sort of writable already by everybody and everyone sort of understands that. And platform, at least in my case, I think is bounded read only right now, but maybe it shouldn't be.
Yeah, it seems like we wouldn't want our normal lifecycle writing to platform. So like you mounted it if, like, let's say our normal phases don't read project toml and instead they're reading out of platform. Then you expect the platform to have populated platform and then provide it read only to the lifecycle. And if you have a prepare step, the prepare step is more of a platform helper than a lifecycle thing.
It's like a Docker credential helper sort of, right?
Yeah, it's a different paradigm.
Do you have to download it separately like Docker credential helper too?
Maybe. No. That is another way we can communicate stuff as well, like in the prepare stage. Like maybe it's actually like something that isn't like an API where you can like get Buildpacks out of a binary that's provided by the platform, sort of like a credential helper where you're like get Buildpacks and it returns to the Buildpacks like the order toml. Maybe it is like something that could be mounted. So that you don't have to have another container stage to do that sort of work. There doesn't have to be a file on disk. It could just, it could be the contract that like emits that file, basically.
Open to a lot of different ways of doing this, as long as I just like it so that the way we do this is setting up an organizational principle that will allow us to easily add things after that. I feel like I'm tired of every time we add something, having this existential conversation about where it goes. I just like it to be obvious how the platform can give the lifecycle configuration in a file. That's not like add a one-off file in a random place.
Yeah,
I
I
want
always
a Joe Tommel.
Joe
Joe.tommel.
Tommel. Are you gonna take com.joe in Project Tommel?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was like my issue with not like blocking accepting like Jesse's PR in the spec, but it just like it goes back to that discussion from the RFC of just like, is layers really the right place to put ordered HOML? It seems like we're just putting it there because it's convenient, and there isn't a better place to put it right now, which I think goes back to what Emily was saying, right? It's like it means there's something fundamentally.
I just feel like it's got the wrong name. It's just not the layers directory. It's like the data directory.
If it was platform/data, would you care? I don't know.
I don't care either way.
I mean, would anyone be having this conversation if it was named platform/data already? Like they'd be like, well, of course it goes in the data for the platform or something.
Yeah. Well, names matter, turns out.
We have about 8 minutes left. Do you think that's enough time to draft a plan to get to 1.0? That's a joke.
I think we're close though.
But I was curious if there was any other business.
I guess I do want to touch on that subject, obviously not to go through it right now, but I guess, do we know whether or not we'd be waiting for further insights from the user research aspect of it, or are we moving forward without it? Or with what we have, I guess.
So 1.0, you
Or
mean?
with what?
Sorry, I was thinking roadmap, and somehow I associated that with 1.0.
Yeah, well, I would like for 1.0 to be on the roadmap. I mean, I feel like I see what you're saying. The user research being a prerequisite for the map.
Yeah, since I know we said we kind of wanted to get it out in February.
I've gotten a lot of value from the user research. It's been really insightful. So I'd hate to not have it go, in building the roadmap. I also have some preconceptions about what I want to be in the roadmap.
So maybe it's worth drafting something up the way it stands now, and then maybe see if we could agree to signing off on it. And I guess, yeah, like I'm just trying to push for that so that we have a little bit more direction on what kind of things we want to contribute during this year.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think it's probably like a hybrid approach of we're probably gonna have a roadmap, but no roadmap set in stone. That was one of the things I think we were trying to do at the latter part of last year, where we're supposed to try to check in on the roadmap in the leadership meetings. And so I think the user research doesn't block us building a roadmap, and it should have influence and sway on changes. Things come up, things change. So yeah, I mean, I think we need to sit down and definitely start talking more about roadmap stuff and not punt it every week in the leadership meeting or set up a separate meeting for it.
I'm going to go ahead and
I
add
think
it to
Ben said
the
he was gonna.
next agenda.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sounds good. I know Ben said he was going to talk to the VMware folks about figuring out meeting scheduling stuff because you all are super packed and busy right now. So we can make time for it.
Yeah, I think we're really close to getting the registry launched. And when that is off my plate, I was thinking about doing what you just said, Javier, kind of like a straw man, putting some things on paper that we can point to and either agree or disagree. So maybe that'll work out.
I'm pretty excited for the post 1.0 or like the future looking work kind of after we wrap up all the things we're working on now. As we talk about that roadmap, like things like build kit integration seem really exciting. But I feel like we should, I think it'll make the most sense to the community if we tie that roadmap for future looking stuff into an announcement about 1.0. That that kind of be the same same thing. Like, look what we did here. It works. This is definitely stable enough to use in production scenarios, and the here are very ambitious goals for the future. Docker build, and it builds a does a build pack build, whatever.
Are you imagining we're going to 1.0 before we publish this roadmap? Because that doesn't seem realistic to me.
I mean, what would we need?
I think you're saying. Wait, that was not the answer I expected.
I'm very confused right now.
I thought it was the roadmap was going to determine 1.0.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
I feel
Are you
like
saying, like, we
that's
should
how we
1.0
release 2022's roadmap.
No, I think we should call. We were talking about 1.0 pretty.
For 1.0, we're not
I
going to
feel
make
like we're
breaking
saying-
changes between minor API versions, and we like have a whole list of those still, right? Unless we're going to do all those in the next 3 weeks and stack packs. This is not going to happen. We're just about to like reorganize the order of the phases.
Yeah.
And reorganize the platform directory.
Are we planning any breaking changes to the Buildpack API? I think 1.0 to me doesn't necessarily mean that we stabilize platform, right? I think if we stabilize the Buildpack API and told people you can make build packs and we're not going to break you, which we already kind of do, right? Then it doesn't seem too unrealistic, but I'm not terribly strongly opinionated about it.
I'm just saying Docker registry is now a sandbox project or distribution, so that's used in production everywhere. So we don't have to 1.0 for people to use it in production.
I think the
we
registry
could
is a
1.0 the
1.0.
life cycle without 1.0ing the spec or something, right? The life cycle is, and how we've been through a couple cycles of being really careful about compatibility. Like the life cycle won't break you. We are gonna keep making you make changes between spec versions for a little bit, though.
I don't think there's an advantage to continuing to advertise build packs as 0 point something, implying that however you're using it now may change really drastically in the future. If that's not the expectation we currently have for our users, right? If we're talking about putting one project number or one version number for the whole project, right? It feels like you could call it 1.0 much sooner.
I think that was a very key realization, is that it sounds like you're talking about the whole project, but then there's so many individual versions and components within this whole project. So I'm not sure how you translate one to the other, although I totally agree that if you were to say from a build packs perspective, there's very, very little to almost no concern about compatibility. That does sound like a 1.0, but then you talk about pack, the version that we release today versus the version that we release a month from now, there's probably going to be something that breaks.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying, I shouldn't have said version for the whole project. What I really mean is the pack and lifecycle component version numbers specifically. Because that's how people consume the project, right? I think that's what we would realistically, if we're announcing 1.0 for build packs, right? I feel like those are the things that we're going to bump. And I think we could do that much sooner than waiting for the build kit integration and stack packs and all of the extra features we want to put on top to land.
I think the one benefit of having the pre 1.0 concept of versioning is that it's let us iterate very, very quickly. And I think as soon as we go 1.0 on anything, it's going to require a lot more thought. So maybe to Emily's point, for the lifecycle, it seems like maybe they're already there. But for something like pack or even the build pack APIs and all the specs, essentially, I don't know, it just doesn't seem quite appropriate without thinking about it more.
Definitely agree we should think about it more. I'm not saying I think it's ready to go right now, but I do feel like, with minimal change, right? It doesn't seem unrealistic to say the pack component, lifecycle component, and build pack API, we're treating those as if they are, 1 point something version software right now, even though they're 0 point versioned.
I'd like to go down that list of breaking changes because I suspect when I look at it this time, I might say, that's just not worth it. Let's just never do that or something like that. Because I kind of feel like what you're saying, Stephen, or the part that I agree with is people are using it. And we are if we do change something, we are going to hurt them. and let's either lean into that or whatever. So
Makes sense. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention for a little bit of your earlier conversation. If I said something that seemed very disjointed from that.
No, it was just, we thought you were saying got to eat your vegetables first, and you were actually saying, no, I just want dessert. I think that was the disconnect.
Makes sense.
I'm worried about us having said that we wouldn't make breaking changes in the spec post 1.0. I don't want to 1.0 the spec yet because I feel like there are still things that aren't.
We've kicked a lot of
set
cans
up.
down that road.
Sorry.
I feel like we've kicked a lot of cans down the road of we will deal with this before 1.0.
Yeah. I think we need to like deal with it, right? There's like a lot of unglamorous work that would be involved in reorganizing the spec so that things we want to do in the future can be added without breaking anything. And it's hard to get it prioritized because a lot of it isn't really user facing, right? No one's asking for us to reorganize the files, and they'll reorganize the labels and come up with a organizational strategy that'll make it easy for us to make changes in the future. But we need to do that.
Yeah.
Also got to drop.
Till next time, then.